Hello, welcome to the Weekly Review, a program of South Network, making sense of news and topics relevant to South Sudan and its diaspora. My name is Roy George Modiam, the producer and host. Today we are joined by two guests. Jame David Kolok is an activist, the founder and executive director of Foundation for Democracy and Accountable Governance. And also we have advocate Juma Mabor. Marial is the program coordinator for peace building, justice, and reconciliation at ALAM, and secretary to subcommittees on the judiciary and financial matters at the National Constitutional Review Commission, the one yet to be reconstituted. Both of them are members of the technical committee formed by the Ministry of Justice to conduct public consultation on the formation of, on the enactment of the legislation to govern the formation of the Commission on Truth, Reconciliation, and Healing in South Sudan, as per the revitalized peace agreement. And so, welcome to the Weekly Review.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Raja.
We will be discussing a lot of issues, current affairs in South Sudan at the moment, including the recent letter by the United Nations Secretary General to the President of the Security Council, which was pursuant to the Security Resolutions 2567-2021, in which the Secretary General is requested, in accordance with best practices, to conduct and provide the Security Council with a neat assessment, including security, procedural, and logistical requirements to create an enabling environment for elections in South Sudan. Whereby there in the letter, the Secretary General, Guterres, said, South Sudan, he said, though not explicitly, but mentioned that South Sudan will need 2 years to prepare for elections. Another issue we'll discuss also is the swearing in of the legislators, which happened about 2 weeks ago, the members of the Transitional South Sudan National Legislature. And we will also look into the demands of the People's Coalition for Civil Action, the PCCA. Welcome once again, and let's start with you, Jame. The issue of the elections, you certainly came through the letter by Antonio Guterres, and what's your view regarding that? Because when I interviewed you last time with one of your colleagues, there was that issue of when to do elections, or even when to whether there is a need for extension of the term of the government and the lifespan of the peace agreement, which was controversial, and the civil society had a stance by then against extension. At the moment, with these developments, what do you say? And actually, do you think South Sudan is prepared to have elections if it is to have it by the revitalized peace agreement timelines?
Well, thank you for having me in this discussion. And I think in regards to the issue of elections, the revised agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan is very clear on the processes leading to conducting elections. The provision in the agreement is that there must be elections towards the end of the transition. And therefore, before the transition ends, there must be an electoral body put in place to foresee South Sudanese engaging in an electoral process. Now, the assumption is that after this particular period, of course, the transition 36 months, it would have given an opportunity for the government, in this case, unity government, to put in place the necessary environment and mechanisms that could be able to enhance not only election, but free and fair election. Unfortunately, we are now towards midway to the transition. And yet, when you compare the environment right now in terms of other electoral processes, like say in the region, you would notice clearly that South Sudan is still quite behind in terms of having a conducive environment for elections. But now, from our perspective as civil society, we believe that the agreement should actually be implemented the way it is signed, and that the issue of elections, whether it is happening or not, should not be attached to a slow process of implementing the peace agreement in a manner that then it generates an argument that right now South Sudan is not ready for elections. I think if we have the will towards ensuring that we create that necessary environment, then we can have the opportunity to have our people thoroughly returned to South Sudan, to have those in the IDPs have the confidence to return to their homes, and to have all these necessary reforms put in place. And these are things that can expedite if we really have the momentum and will to conduct elections.
Let me welcome Council Juma Mabor. What do you say about these developments?
Yeah, thank you, Roger, for having me once again on our network and weekly review. I think just like Kolok said, you know, the whole thing about the election is anchored in the revitalized peace agreement. And it therefore requires systematic and speedy implementation of the peace agreement. But then, if you look again at the report or the letter of the Secretary General to the UN Security Council, you would be able to see that in as much as there are opportunities for us to hold election after the transitional period, there are also challenges, both technical and practical challenges that need to be addressed before we reach there. And I think this is an eye-opener, because when the Secretary General launched their consultation on whether it will be possible to hold elections after the transitional period, they had consultation with different stakeholders, including the parties to the peace agreement. And I think having had the information now, that is what needs to be done before we reach there, it is important that all of us as parties, all of us as stakeholders, all of us as actors, both at the national, regional, and international level, need to put our effort together so that we can be able to have that election, because there is nothing that is impossible. If we are talking about election in 2023 and we are still in 2021, then there is a possibility that whatever that needs to be done, because the most important element about this letter of the Secretary General is that the international community is pledging up to 80% of support, both technical and capacity building, and even in terms of resources to support the election. So just like Jame said, what we need is a political will from all the political parties, and especially the members in the R-ARCSS, to put their effort together and expedite the restructuring of the electoral institution, and also ensuring that electoral laws are in place in as far as recommendations are concerned. And we'll have election in 2023, no doubt about that.
That means changes in the timelines of the agreement 2023, because people were calling for elections earlier than that, 2022. Looking at the letter of the Secretary General, he noted that, quote, while aspirations for peaceful and credible elections run high in South Sudan, they are tempered by ambiguities, concern over a fragile security situation and a challenging political and socio-economic environment, unquote. That is true. And then this is where there is also issue to do with the fact that there are still up groups who are holding arms, and they are not part of the agreement. One of the time I interviewed one guest on this show, and he was on the point that there can be an arrangement that can be reached with those holding arms to put down their arms, not to put down their arms, but to allow the election to happen, and then maybe negotiate other things with the government. Is this the scenario we are seeing? Because practically, and also according to the observation by the Secretary General, there is that issue of insecurity. So elections, insecurity, and the time frame. What do you say about that? both of you.
Well,
Kolok,
I
you
think.
go ahead. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yeah, I really don't quite agree on the assertion that, for example, say the whole groups can be negotiated with such that they give a temporary leeway for an electoral process to happen when they're actually not part of the electoral process. I think that is practically impossible. However, I agree that the question of security is very, very critical. And I think when you look at the peace agreement, it was designed in a manner that most of those security provisions and mechanisms instituted during the transitional period. And there is a critical reason why that is so. And the reason is that the entire process, including its implementation, if it is to go smoothly, requires stability. And stability is drawn from our ability to unify forces, able to establish a command structure that can respond to orders from specific individuals. Now, the recent schemasis that we have noted, like in McGuinness, depicts a very serious concern towards the issue of security and how it relates to elections. Now, without unifying our forces, we are likely to have a situation where individual groups will rise up and start disrupting the people. The other thing is that, of course, obviously, we understand in the unification process has got also consequences in terms of the soldiers that are occupying the training sites. We have seen considerable reports coming in on some of the challenges that they're facing. They don't have food, they don't have medicine, they don't have a proper facility to get accommodated. So this can delineate into some kind of rebellion that can easily disrupt the electoral process. But we are not saying that these are impossibilities. We are saying that I think the level of training preparation has been done before. What we just need is to be able to formidably put resources as a government to be able to expedite the process of the nation, and therefore this then builds the confidence of the citizens and creates the necessary environment for the electoral process to be able to move forward. These are really fundamental issues. Lastly, on the issue of the time, of course, there has been an entire delay in the implementation of the peace agreement to an extent that the transition itself had to be moved to 22nd of February last year. Now, that means the start of the time starts also on the 22nd. That automatically moves the period of elections towards the end of the 36 months, which will go definitely towards 2023. But then we know that if the will is there, for example, you know very well that during the post-CPA era, we had only 6 years. But within the 6 years, we had elections and we had a referendum. These are things that have happened in the same South Sudan with a very complicated logistic arrangement in the same South Sudan that time didn't even have pure security arrangement put in place. So why can't we do the same to put our effort towards ensuring that we are able to deliver elections within the time provided?
But you realize that the unification you mentioned about here does not include those who are outside the agreement.
Yes, of course it doesn't. And that is why we're saying that the prospect to enhance the environment for election should also include our commitment to engage with the forces that are not part of the peace agreement. Because obviously it's not going to be realistic. Anybody would use that opportunity, for example, to launch attacks simply because they feel that they are not part of the process, or simply because they want to use their presence outside the peace agreement to create scenarios that will jeopardize the electoral process. These are things that are going to happen, and they must be seen holistically, not just treating electoral process by people that are part of it, including those that are outside, are very important.
Mabor, you come in answering what I've asked right now, but also looking at, we keep having new groups coming up. Until when are we going to continue with peace negotiations and transitions? This is practically because of course there are grievances that already exist. But how do you move out of this? Because you can have transitions every time, and when does it stop?
Yeah. Thank you, Roger. I think just like my colleague has stated, election is supposed to be a universal exercise, and everybody is supposed to participate in it, including the whole out group that you have just hinted about. And the assumption now is that by 2023, as stated very clearly, we shall be having these people on board. And I think that is why there are ongoing negotiations with the whole out group of Soma and the rest in Italy, which is an issue. But now there are other developments which are a security threat to the peace agreement and also to the stability in the country, the manganese issues that have come up. And I really want to take this opportunity to thank the IGAD Council of Ministers for intervening and trying to see how these people can be able to come together. So the assumption at the end of the day would be by 2022, say maybe late 2022, all these people have been brought on board such that we can be able to move together as a team and go for election. Now, on your last question, yeah, there are so many other groups that are still coming out, and you would see that these are again trying to sabotage the progress that we are already trying to register. The whole thing is about power struggle, and you have seen the thing that have been said by the group that broke away from the main IO. I don't know how they call themselves again, and then they take over from Yak, as they put it. But what needs to be done is that the grantors to the peace agreement must make sure that there are no particular accommodation for people that want to sabotage the peace agreement. Because the moment we encourage that, everybody, Jame can go away today, I go away today, and then we want renegotiation of the provision of the agreement. And one of the things that we must understand as South Sudanese is that there is no any other better agreement that we will get than the revitalized peace agreement, because this is what brought almost everybody on board from different political affiliation, from different political grouping, from different tribes, from different stakeholders. So what we need to do is to see how we can be able to nourish this child such that we can be able to get to the next level. And the only exit strategy is for us to now capture what the Secretary General has proposed to the UN Security Council and capitalize on that such that we can be able to go through the election. So the question of different grouping coming up every day is another way for me, a pullback or a drawback kind of position, because it is really affecting our focus on how we should be able to move forward toward the election. That is my main target. I project that by election, then everybody should be on board such that we are able to compete in a very good level playing field.
Kolok, you as an activist, your expectation, the Transitional National Legislature, the members have been sworn in. Your expectations, what are you expecting that they should actually prioritize at the moment?
Yes, well, I think there's one thing that we need to underscore as far as the engagement of the MPs is actually concerned. And that is the question of time. The agreement states that both the executive and the parliament, which is the Transitional National Legislature, must serve their terms concurrently. The assumption is that both these institutions of governance are very important to collaboratively work together towards addressing the implementation of the peace agreement. Unfortunately, we all know that there has been some kind of significant delay in the swearing in or entirely even in reconstituting the parliament. And now these guys are coming in almost midway or even midway to the transition, meaning that they simply have equal time left, which is probably a middle of the 36 months, for them to be able to effectively engage in the issues of governance as far as their representation is concerned. Now, the first priority is definitely for them to acknowledge that they are late and that their engagement towards ensuring that the peace agreement is actually realized is very, very important. That should be able to bring quick commitment towards looking into the agreement, because the agreement itself has got specific provisions that are supposed to be addressed by the parliament itself. For example, there's been a number of legislations that are required for the peace agreement to be implemented. Some of these legislation, for example, include the legislation on the permanent constitutional making process that must be passed by the parliament. There are legislations that has to do with, for example, transitional justice. These ones have to also be passed by parliament, as well as a significant number of reforms that are required actually to be passed. So the first priority should be ensuring that they contribute effectively towards passing those legislations and ensure that the peace agreement is actually implemented. Number two, South Sudan has actually had no budget since the formation of the transition. There's been no formal budget sanctioned by the parliament. The executive has just been operating in a budget that has literally been approved only by the cabinet. And yet, governments do not operate that way. Governments require that the executive only do the level of projections that constitute the budget. Then the parliament looks into that budget, then it is passed. Now, we want to quickly ensure that the parliament is able to pass the national budget and ensure that the budget that is passed reflects the abilities of South Sudan. Right now, we have the governors, we have all these states government, they don't have resources. We have issues even within the peace agreement, including the unification of the forces. They say they don't have resources. We have civil servants that have gone for many, many months without being paid just because of resources. So we want to make sure that we expedite this process and ensure that we have a budget that can be financed nationally, not a budget that are financed by borrowed money.
Well, and then you see, you mentioned here the issue of the term supposed to run concurrently, and then also the legislation to be reformed and some even to be enacted, new legislation. And even you remember there were legislation that were to be reformed prior to the transitional period, during the presidential period. So that legislature that existed did not do that job that was required by the agreement. Now, there are people suggesting that, even including the Reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, RGMEC, that this current parliament passed those legislation, and which is fine if they pass it the way intended, and also reform and the security sector and others that are needed to be reformed. But then also beyond that, you participated in the workshop on the permanent constitution making process, right? And the issue of the resolutions of that workshop and what is happening at the moment. Is there something going on? Because as the media, of course, the media was in conflict recently, and their function was even reportedly cut off by the national security, stopped by national security, because they were demanding inclusion in the process and stuff like that and so on. But then, as the public would like to know what is happening. Is there something going on after the workshop, or there's nothing? And even the workshop resolutions have not been published officially.
Yes, I think the process has started, but it is honest to say that is not moving as quickly as the citizens actually expect. I think the whole idea about the workshop was to start generating ideas and inputs towards ensuring that the legislative development process that then guides the development of the permanent constitution represent an inclusive thoughts from the citizens of South Sudan. One thing I have to say is that definitely the workshop generated a very good document with a considerable number of ideas in regards to, for example, the structures that are required in moving the consultative process forward, whether it is the reconstituted National Constitutional Review Committee, or how some of these mechanisms in terms of the consultation itself should happen. Now, that document has been submitted to the best of our knowledge to the Ministry of Justice. And the role of the Ministry of Justice is to operationalize that document into providing the guidance required for the legislation. So the drafting process is expected to move quickly so that part of what is incorporated in the legislation informs the process of the engagement with citizens and gathering views of the citizens. But that process is still moving, ensure that the time frame provided are not actually of moving forward. So I expect that their first assignment is to be able to ask the same questions that you're asking me, and be able to know exactly what is happening. If the Minister of Justice or Minister of Justice is moving slowly, they will have to give and justify and assume that everything about the peace process is moving slow. And yet the question of constitution remains very, very fundamental in addressing the conflict itself in South Sudan. So I think it is important that this process is expedited. And as civil society, we are still going to continue to urge the ministry to move as quickly as possible to ensuring that the drafting process actually moves forward.
I saw in that document that was circulating, though it was not official, signed by some and others did not sign. It mentioned that the state media shall be allowed to cover something to cover the process. But of course, as a country is more than a state. The state media, there are independent media in the country, and many of them at the moment have been complaining about their non-inclusion in the process. Isn't that something of concern to the civil society? Because without the independent media, without the media being allowed to cover the process independently, then there are real issues there that are of concern.
Well, I really hope that the question of coverage and the engagement of the media do not be to the state media. I mean, recently, the United Nations mission in South Sudan has actually brought the journalists together and conducted training in terms of how the media houses should be able to engage in the constitutional making process and should be able to provide a transparent feedback to the citizens. So anything that exclude, for example, the private media houses and the independent media houses would constitute a sabotage to a process that is supposed to be inclusive and supposed to naturally generate ideas in terms of what citizens want. And it has to be done in a manner that depicts some kind of confidence towards engaging in the process. Now, I'm quite sure if there is any attempt to exclude certain media houses, that will be resisted by the civil society, and it will also be resisted by the media houses. So I hope that that conversation should have actually been seriously included, even in the legislative process, to acknowledge that the involvement of various stakeholders, including the media, is very, very important if we are to deliver a constitution that is people's friendly, and not a constitution that is just directed by interests of political elites.
Well, we're still waiting for Juma Mabor to rejoin us, and we hope he comes in. But welcome back, Juma. Yes, you found us. We discussed a little bit we discussed some issues, the swearing in of the legislators, and also some issues to do with the permanent constitution making and expectation from of the civil society, including you, who is also a council, from the legislators. So Jame has already expressed himself, and you can give us your expectation from what do you expect from the legislators?
Yeah, in fact, we are in our context, things are being done halfway. The expectation was upon the swearing in of the National Legislature, both the House of Common and the House of Representatives, or here they call them Council of States, and the National Legislative Assembly. Our expectation was that the president or the presidency would give a policy speech such that these people can be able to debate on that policy speech on a number of issues. For example, in South Sudan, the only headache that we have today that they can be followed by some other thing, and which is the priority, is peace and security in the country. So we expected the president to have, after the swearing in, have given these members of parliament an agenda to debate upon, such that we can be able to set this country on the path of progress and prosperity. Unfortunately, the members have been sworn in, the president and the presidency were not there. And then they are just loitering, just like any one of us. They have not even started any business in the parliament. So our expectation was that as soon as the members of parliament are sworn in, they would be able now to take charge and start moving this country to a direction. And these are the people that would have even been telling most of the members of the executive in the replies peace agreement to implement some of the chapters that have been missing out in the agreement. And maybe they would have also informed the executive that we are not done. Can you please establish the legislatures at the state level such that we can be able to move together and we start operationalizing some of these agreements. So the expectation from the people is that time is running fast and the members of parliament should be given the opportunity to do their role. Enacting a number of laws, for example, you have had Jame and I and other members are working, collecting views and opinion from the public across the country such that we can be able to enact a legislation which will be used to form the Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation. And if the parliament is not on session, who is supposed to do that? Plus a number of other legislation that are part of the implementation of the peace agreement. So these people have a lot of work, but they have not started. When do they start is what we don't know. Why they have not started is what also we don't know. And we need really to talk to the parties to the agreement to ensure that these people continue with their work. Maybe they are still drawing the timetable, but then it is late. They need to do something.
Well, we intended to discuss a lot of issues today, but I don't know whether the time will allow. There's this also major issue about the People's Coalition for Civil Action, PCCA. Their members reported were arrested, some were released, one is still under detention. What can you tell us? What do you know is the latest regarding the People's Coalition for Civil Action, and also your thoughts about their call for protest?
Yeah, this morning I saw their transitional framework, and it is a whole ambitious framework of what needs to be done in this country. And the citizen, the People Coalition for Civil Action is led by responsible citizens of this country. We must accept that because most of them are think tanks, most of them are former politicians, more of them are academia. And the issues that they have raised are pertinent issues that need a very critical national conversation. And we all agree on some of these things that they have agreed. But unfortunately, the approach turned out to be different because when we look at what they are calling for, the revolution or civil action or uprising, you know the context of South Sudan. We are tribalized, we are militarized, and then when you talk about uprising, you are telling the ordinary citizen to go on the street. And this ordinary citizen will be confronted by the security forces. And you know the consequences that will be. So what these people are raising is a good thing, but it should be put through conversation with the stakeholders, because the only thing that we need to do now is to implement the peace agreement. For example, somebody like Rajab Mwandis is a signatory to the peace agreement. I think Jame will agree with me on that. And then you look at somebody like Abraham Awole, is a think tank who was behind the entire issue of the national dialogue. And you look at somebody like Uncle Kwelagwe. These are people that are stakeholders in the management of the affairs of this country. And therefore, what we need to do is for us to persuade some of these actors to ensure that whatever we give them, they need to implement it to its letter and its spirit. And the only way out is the peace agreement. Because for me, I'm afraid of the context in which we are operating in. If it is another country, it would be different. But if it is South Sudan, look at the dichotomies of our societies and our communities. It will turn out into a genocide. It will also turn out into anarchy. And it may even bring people back to the table to negotiate more. And that will be taking us 10 years or 15 years backward. So what I'm trying to say is that I'm not for the civil action, because that will again have its own implication, and it will not help us in addressing some of the issues that they have raised.
How about the reaction of the government pursuing them or detaining them? Don't you think they deserve to be respected in expressing themselves and their right to assembly?
As a lawyer, there are two things that are involved, Roger, and I think you have that legal background. Number one, there are two competing interests here. Somebody is calling for civil uprising, which in some part may amount to treason, because you are trying to talk about regime change. And then on the other hand is the Bill of Rights, where there are issues of right to assembly, and then the freedom of expression, and freedom of speech. So what we need to do is to draw a balance. And I think we need to call, on one hand, the People Coalition for Civil Action to relent on their call because of the violence that it may bring upon the country. And then engage on a national conversation, because already they have a platform. They are not like people who don't have a platform. You know, Jame and I and you and these other people, we have a platform to talk to different stakeholders about a number of issues that they have raised. On the other hand, as a lawyer, I will also call on the government to use the legal means by ensuring that the law is respected. So if you have arrested somebody based on the call that they have made, take them through the police, let the police do the investigation and bring them before the court, such that the court can be able now to conduct the trial and declare whether they are guilty or not guilty based on the charges that may be brought upon them. So instead of driving ourselves to the extreme end, the People Coalition calling for extreme revolution, and then the government trying to shut down some of these people based on their call, then we may not have a middle ground. And I don't want that to happen as a lawyer, because there are Bill of Rights on one side, and then there is also a rule of law on the other, and we must respect that.
The People's Coalition for Civil Action said they have had enough. I saw in one of their and this is that's what they said. They said they have had enough.
Yeah, sometimes, you know, something are easy said than that. If I look at the framework, you know, I read over it today. Very nice one, very articulated and very researched, and also a very progressive framework. But now let's come to action. If you want to implement that, this is what we have been struggling with. We wanted to change the government in 2015. They had crisis. We want to again go for election in 2018. They had crisis. We are now talking about election in 2013. They had crisis. And if you look at the framework, the way I have read it, it's saying everybody must go. And you know, these are people who are owning the powers and the guns and everything today. Do you think they will just go and sit down? They will have to react and defend themselves. And in the process of doing that, will face a lot of consequences. That's why we are saying no. Instead of us going to that extreme, we may need to find ways of how we can be able to give them the pressure such that these people can listen to us. At least now they can feel that people are not happy because these are their insiders. You know, the SUD Institute is a government think tank. They have been a government think tank for quite some time, but they are professional. Rajab Mondis has been participating in the peace agreement. So these people cannot be taken lightly. But what we need to do is also to talk to our brothers that let us try to explore all the other means instead of resorting to civil arrest. Because at the end of the day, you know, all of us will run away. Jame will go and sit in his house in Kampala. I will go back to Nairobi. You sit in your studio in Nairobi. These guys can go anywhere, but the ordinary citizen will die. That is what we don't want to happen.
Well,
so we may be tired, yes, but we have an opportunity, and that.
Jame, you
go ahead.
You come in your reaction, and also if you have information that you would like to share with the public regarding the safety or the current state of the signatories of the document, the declaration, you are welcome.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for bringing that topic. And personally, a number of us have followed the decision very, very closely. Right from the time it came out and through these days, followed by subsequent press releases and interviews that have been given by the individuals that are currently on the run. Now, one thing which is clear is that when you read the declaration, you would notice that that declaration is actually an evaluation of the 10 years of independence of South Sudan. And the ultimate conclusion is that there has been significant lapses and lack of progress and a very state of despair of the South Sudanese people. The concerns that are raised there, like what Maulana has said, are very pertinent issues. Those are issues that in a real world where, for example, freedom of expression and speech is enhanced, could provide a platform for conversation. Now, one thing we have learned out of that declaration is that it probably depicts that there has been very limited opportunities for direct conversation, system and the leadership of the country. And that wherever you don't find an opportunity to have conversation, people will take advantage of that and use other avenues, including the question of civil action. Now, in terms of my recommendations, I wanted the parties and the government to acknowledge that the issues that are raised are actually very important. But unfortunately, what we see is an ultimate judgment of the question of regime change, which is overshadowing the critical issues that have been raised by that group. My recommendation is that I think this should have been used as an opportunity instead of arresting their members. It should be used as an opportunity to bring them on board. Like Maulana said, the individuals engaged in this process are very serious people. We have all been with them in South Sudan. We have been honestly and consistently discussing the issues of the implementation of the peace agreement. We have been honestly identifying some of these challenges, and we feel that they would have taken that as an opportunity to engage with these individuals and really highlight some of those issues. Now, in terms of the arrest, of course, obviously, we expect some reaction. But if South Sudan is governed on the basis of democratic dispensation and respect for human rights and rule of law, then there should be a due process provided to somebody like the former governor, whom I think until now has not been released. The question is, why keep him in custody beyond the stipulated time in which it would have been brought to court? So if there are some issues as civil society activists, we say, please let the governor be arraigned before the judges. And if there is a case to answer, you should be able to answer. Now, in terms of the rest of the individuals, we believe that there should be an opportunity to try to reach out to them wherever they are and have them. Otherwise, I think the voices that are coming from there are very serious ones. And I believe that there are South Sudanese also that are in support of what they have actually raised. We hope that the government will reason beyond the pursuit for arrest and be able to create a situation where those tangible issues can be able to be addressed.
Well, we are heading towards the end of the program, and but we have some issues still. Do you have anything to share with the public so far regarding the technical committee which you are part of that has been formed to gather views from the public on the enactment of the law to govern the process of transitional process of truth, reconciliation, and healing?
Yeah, I think we have an established committee of slightly above 30 people who are currently engaged in the preparation towards the consultative process. One thing that I can assure the public is that is one of the critical aspects of the peace agreement that is taking shape. And the Ministry of Justice, both with the established technical committee, are collaboratively working towards defining its structures and be able to also ensure that the technical committee members are well prepared in terms of their engagement with the public, as well as they are also well financed, because ultimately the success of the committee also depends on resources. So right now there are significant steps that have been taken. The committee has established a structure of a chair, a deputy chair, and a secretary general. They are now establishing subcommittees that will, for example, others will deal with the issues of the methodology, issues of mapping, some specific areas that are consultation is supposed to take place. There are also a committee that will be focusing on civic education and so on. So these are significant signs which are good towards ensuring that transitional justice is enhanced. And we are looking forward to quickly move to a stage where we can be able to undertake, for example, training of the committee members and start deploying people towards the consultative process. We know right now there are a bit of challenges because South Sudan, of course, the weather is not a good one in terms of movement, but we believe that collaboratively with our partners who are in South Sudan supporting this process, the technical committee should be able to be given an opportunity to be able to engage with everybody. And we hope that the government will be able to support that process effectively, ensure that every individual is included in sharing their ideas in regards to how the legislation should look like.
Juma, Mabor?
Yeah, I think comprehensively, Jame has put it correctly. We are still at the stages of establishment, and we are putting a secretariat in place, plus the budgeting and the rest of the thing. Once that are done, then we'll be able to kick off. And of course, you know the importance and the significance of Chapter 5 of the agreement, because it try to look at a number of commissions and the issues of hybrid code and the truth healing and reconciliation commission and the repatriation. So on compensation authority. So it's a very big chapter that is really going to touch on the lives of the people. And the good thing is this commission is comprising a number of people from different part of the country and also from different groups. And therefore we will be able to work very well, although we have different structures and a leadership of the committee that is supposed to give official position. But for the purpose of our discussion here, we may be able to give a few highlights of what we are supposed to be doing and how we are going to do it.
Well, there's this split within the SPLM-IO, SPLM-IO, SPLM-AIO. So, no, SPLM-AIO, yeah, SPLM movement and
There is a party and
SPLM-IO.
Yes, yeah, the military and the politicians. And there are those declaring their allegiance to the other group that has split and made a declaration. And the IGAD has started engaging them here and there. And you, from your side, what would you say as your message to the leadership of the SPLM-IO, both factions and the government and also IGAD, in regards to the split and also the implementation of the peace agreement?
Yeah, from professional standpoint, what we would say is that these are internal issues that they ought to address. You know, it's just like what happened in the SPLM, the ministry in 2013, when they did not put their house in order and they thought that whatever crisis will happen there will not engulf the country. Some of us had issues when we tried to tell the SPLM, please, you address your issues before they explode and engulf the country. But we were being threatened by some of the members that later on changed to different direction. So the same thing is what we may need to repeat to the SPLM-IO, that they are a main partner in the peace agreement. And unless they forget about their internal interests and pursue the national interests as they had established themselves, then they are going to be taken advantage of. Because, you know, when you are a partner in some agreement, not everybody would want you to remain a senior partner in that agreement. And I think that is some internal kind of analysis that they should have made by themselves. That when we fight, you know, they say when the brothers fight, the stranger inherit their wealth or whatever they say. So I think it is for the benefit of the IO, even before it becomes a benefit of South Sudan, that they put their house in order such that they remain senior partners to the peace agreement. And then as South Sudanese, their peace among themselves is prerequisite to the implementation of the greater peace agreement. And that's why I want to call upon those who may be having some hand in the war of the IO, within the IO, to try and question themselves. What is it that is it for them? Such that we can be able to give people the opportunity to discuss their differences. Yeah, there are a number of differences, political, you know, tribal, all those things they have been cited by the group that declare themselves to be outside that. But then you need to support them such that they can be able to agree together. And I really appreciate the step taken by the IGAD Council of Ministers and also the presidency, such that they can be able to come together and forget about this other split up group within the same political party or the armed group. Because once we do that, the whole attention will be taken there, and then we will not be able to implement the peace agreement as it is supposed to be.
During the SPLM disagreement in 2013, there were issues also that people mentioned, like unfulfilled promises of the liberation. Now the SPLM-IO, the other group, they also talk about, you know, deviation from what they stood for before, and lack of implementation of what has been agreed. And any views on that? You and also Jame will do that.
Jame, maybe you can take over.
Yes, I think yes, while
we're not getting you well.
I agree.
Huh?
Are you getting me?
Yeah, we're getting you now better. Yeah.
Okay, what I was saying is that I needed to underscore something a little bit to add into what Maulana has said. While I agree to some extent that the IO issue is an internal matter, we have to accept and agree that the consequences of that split has got an adverse effect on the implementation of the peace agreement, especially on the aspect of the security. And therefore, we believe that I think the national government the government has got a responsibility of confronting that situation as a united government. I think Dr. Riek Machar is a first vice president of the Republic of South Sudan. He's not a first vice president of McGuinness. And therefore, if we acknowledge that he's a vice president of the Republic of South Sudan, that literally means that if there is any issue in regards to threat to the implementation of the peace agreement, the presidency and indeed the government must respond to those issues. I want to believe that, yes, IGAD has come in towards ensuring that there is some kind of mediation, which is okay. But I think we are urging the government, of course, we have seen some steps taken by the president to ensure that he takes a lead so that we don't just take things for granted and build some kind of precedence that if, for example, somebody has got his own challenges, he can decide to stage his own rebellion simply because he wants to find his or her way to the government. I think that is one of our biggest challenges in South Sudan, that sometimes, yes, the issues raised by, for example, the team of General Garwit are very serious issues. However, we thought that it should be resolved within the context of the peace agreement. We're not going to expect, for example, IGAD to come up with another mechanisms that will, for example, enhance another new negotiations in which these guys will have to give their demands in terms of how they come into the government. If we do that, we are going to set a precedent and we're going to see considerable number of different individuals that will take advantage of this situation to say we can fight and find our way into government. This is not only a message to IGAD.
Technically, they are members of that movement at the time of the signing of the agreement, which is also recognized by the agreement. And in line with the agreement, they also have a voice, which practically can happen.
Absolutely.
Practically can happen in terms of the share, the power sharing that has been allocated to the SPLM, which they were part of at the signing of the agreement. So sharing of position and coming into government, as far as the agreement is concerned, is perfectly fits within the agreement, within even those splits, as long as they follow the agreement.
Yes, exactly, and that is what I'm saying. I'm not disputing their rights to access power as far as the provision of the percentage for power sharing is concerned. That is absolutely their right. But what I'm against is to see a situation where they're going to be treated as a separate entity to renegotiate their way into power. If there is going to be some kind of mediation, the mediation has to acknowledge that within the peace agreement, there is a specific percentage that has been given to SPLM-IO. And if there are questions of power sharing, that has to be revisited within that particular percentage. We are not going to entertain, for example, scenarios where you say, let's go, for example, back to Addis or Khartoum, and let's sit again and we start renegotiating a different arrangement altogether. That is what I'm trying to raise here. So fundamentally, this message is not only to IGAD, but the message is also to some of the guarantors, including Sudan, that has been playing a very critical role to ensure that they should not appear to be complicit in this process. They should ensure that any initiative or any kind of rebellion that emerge like that must be seen as negative force towards the implementation of the peace agreement, and therefore they must be tamed to come together and discuss whatever concerns they have within the context.
Yes, we are running out of time. Finally, do you trust the you have confidence IGAD will really put their other interests that are not in line with the agreement aside and do what is right continuously in terms of pushing the peaceful process forward?
To be honest with you, Roger,
we are not getting you.
I feel. Yeah, are you getting me now?
Yeah.
Are you getting me?
Yes, we are getting you.
Yes. What I was saying is that I think South above depending on regional mechanism to resolve their own internal problems. to me, whatever is happening in McGuinness is something that if these leaders are really committed, it can be resolved even without the INF has got its own weaknesses. And I'm sure they are rushing towards coming in because literally, if they don't act, this is going to lead into collapse of the peace agreement that they are not able to even push for its implementation. So really, my recommendation is that at this stage, this focus should be within the unity government and IO. They should be able to sit together and provide mechanism through which they can internally resolve those that South Sudan can, even without the engagement of entities like IGAD.
Council Mabor.
Yeah, I think, Roger, what need to be understood is that there is what we call the peace fatigue, that the international community and even the IGAD countries and our neighbors are struggling with, and even South Sudanese, because from independent up to now, we are talking about peace, 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 and peace. And people have gotten tired about that. So it is about South Sudanese, just like Jame has put it, that we repeat to ourselves, go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, what is it that we need for us to get into peace? And exactly like you said, the issue of Manganese is not something that could even invite Sudan, who is bordering the place, or even Ethiopia, or even Uganda. It is just the president to sit and ask React what is happening. And then React will say, okay, I have a challenge here and there. And then they would sit together because they are a very huge number of people, and we believe very wise people, who would sit together in the presidency with support from some individual within the government and say, this is what we need to do, and we need to finish this one. For example, if it is about the Gadway and Olich, you know, these are people that you can talk to, because apart from being liberators, they are people who are also part of this agreement, and they know very well what the agreement is all about. So whatever internal differences that they have, they need to be held to resolve them. IGAD and other members of the international community may have their interests, but those are invisible interests that we should not even start accusing them, because if you allow problem to continue cropping up in your house, then you don't have any moral authority to tell the neighbor never to always intervene. So it is important that we leave IGAD aside. Whatever help they are extending, we can accept it, but it is our own problem that we need our own solution.
Well, with that, we have come to the end of the program, the weekly review, making sense of topics and news relevant to South Sudan and its diaspora. We had Advocate Juma Mabor, a program coordinator for peace building, justice and reconciliation at Alam, and Jame David Kolok, who is also an activist and the executive director of Foundation for Democracy and Accountable Government and Accountable Governance. Both of them are members of the technical committee formed by the Ministry of Justice to gather public views from the public on the issue to do with the enactment of the legislation to govern the process of truth, reconciliation, and healing in South Sudan. Thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Roger. Bye.